Chapter 11, Arkansas. Red, I want to talk to you, said Andy, about Tennessee's poetic fugitives. John Crow Ransom, Allen Tate, Robert Penn Warren, and the 13 others that were against the industrialization and so much more. They were determined to redefine the way the world viewed the South. They would prove that the South could produce highly intellectual art, and they did just that with their books entitled Anthology and I'll Take My Stand. They were like prophets, warning us of what might be in store for us because of our exploitation of natural resources. And this was in the mid-1920s and the 30s. They were aware it was an evil dispensation and the country was doomed. Dehumanization and materialism, the beginnings of the Great War with nature, man versus machine, the machine against nature. They believe humans can choose their course of action. Read, they fought and wrote to be remembered, and lo and behold, they were and are remembered. Their motto was, "We that fight, knowing the killer, will one day be killed." Red just looked at him silent for a while. Andy seemed to feel that Red was not right, worried. So Andy asked him what was going on. Andy, look, there is something odd about all of the fugitives, said Red. I need to read more about them in the book. I'll Take My Stand. Here's what's bothering me, Andy. Randall Jarrell studied under the fugitives. They published him and gave him a teaching job. Randall embraced their literary stances while rejecting their politics. In 1942, he joined the United States Army Air Forces. After that, his early poetry was about his wartime experiences in this country. Later, Randall, after President Kennedy was shot, Randall spent days in front of his television weeping, sad to the max. And after he published his book, The Lost World, he slashed his wrist. Then a couple of years later, while walking along a highway near Chapel Hill, North Carolina, he was struck by a car and killed. His wife and the authorities judged his death accidental, a verdict made credible by his apparent improvements in health, and the odd, sidelong manner of the collision. Medical professionals judged the injuries consistent with an accident and not with suicide. Nevertheless, because Gerald had recently been treated for mental illness and previous suicide attempt, some of the people closest to him were entirely convinced that his death was accidental and suspected that he might have committed suicide. Andy, what if they were both wrong? What if he was chased? Said Red. Red, what are you getting at? That he was murdered? Asked Andy. I don't know. Maybe, somewhat. But my hunch is he was chased, said Red. Andy looked at Red in a funny way and said, I don't know, Red. You got me thinking, that's for sure. Randall was looked at as a point of reference, not only for younger poets, but for all readers of the 20th century poetry. Like I said, Andy, I have to study all of this after our great journey, said Red. It's been a long day, Red. Let's go get some rest, said Andy. So the both of them went to their roomettes and turned out the lights, and the train chugged along. Both of them thought about what Red said. Andy fell asleep right away, but Red thought he was going to face the Indian in his dreams. Well, when Red needs closer to his God, besides prayer, he sings, God loves me, yes I know, for the Bible tells me so. He sung this over and over until he was there in a dream with the Indians. Red, so you are serving poetry under the worst conditions, showing the courage and bravery that has been the tradition of all spiritual men, no matter the cause, no matter the sacrifice, said the Indian. There's a cause, said Red. To the left of Red, another Indian was holding up a carved rock, and the rock was painted here and there on it. The Indian holding the rock was speaking in his tongue, but he was pointing to the painted bumps and the crevices on the rock. Red moved in closer to look, and the Indian that talks to Red says, that's where we will all live in the years to come. Red noticed that a similar painted bump was on the bottom of the rock. Red was thinking, was this demeaning the South and the North Pole? But the Indian pointed to the mountains, and Then some horses came riding through and splashed into the pond nearby, and they went underwater. They were down there for a while. Red was thinking, my God, how long are they going to be down under there? Then a chief Indian came from behind. He had a feather headdress with a black mask on. And Red knew that it was meant to be a black man, and the chief was chanting and dancing. Another Indian had buffalo hide, saying something while looking at Red. Red understood the Indian when he said Dodge City. Then the main Indian said to Red, beyond those hills is a chasm, and there is where the door to the new world lies. Red had seen an owl fly by at the same time the horses rushed out of the water. The chief shouted in English, only war can bring back the buffalo. Red opened his eyes and thought, what have we done? Red! Could we feel the train was at full speed? His heart was pounding. Andy knocked on the door and said, rise and shine! When they passed Charlie to go to the dining car, Charlie was writing a song, a poem about Arkansas. Then they knew they overslept. Arkansas. From the caves and the caverns to the Heritage Trail, the poetry train sets its sights on Arkansas and it proudly sets sail. From Johnny Cash to Twilight Paris, its famous sons and daughters stand tall, rich in literary history as many can easily recall. The Ozarks lay ahead around the next bend, natural beauty at its finest, God's garden to tend. Although we would like to stay longer, for there's much more to see, the poetry train must move on through the vast grain land. See.